All right. Hey, what's up? Welcome to a live stream right here on Free Will Photos. And today, what we're going to do is kind of talk through some of the direction that ON1 is going. And I'll give some thoughts. And, I don't have any deep insight or anything. All I have is an article from Patrick, who is the VP over at ON1. But we'll get into that here in a second. The point here is that I think we're starting to see a new leaf with the direction that ON1 is going to go. All right. Now, before we jump into this article and, kind of unpack the ideas that are coming from here. The link to that article is down in the description box below. So if you want to go check that out for yourself, you can definitely do that. But while you're down there, I do want to draw your attention to the fact that ON1 is hosting an outdoor photography conference, and it's happening February 23rd through the 25th. And the early bird registration ends on January 30th. So there's also a link in the description box down there if that's something you're interested in that you may want to sign up for. And I'm also happy to announce that I will be one of the instructors in this particular conference. So I have a session that I will be teaching on February 25th. So if that's something you're interested in, then consider signing up. There's some great instructors that are going to be here. So I'm honored to even just be a part of the conference alongside these instructors. But at the same time, I'm really excited for the opportunity that this is to bring information and the joy of using ON1 to a lot more people. So if that's something you're interested in, then consider signing up for that. Again, that early bird registration, it closes on January 30th, and the prices that you see here, those will definitely be different following January 30th. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the article. Or before we jump into the article, I actually have a PDF, and I'll just go ahead and pull this up here. We'll go full screen on it. And I'm going to hide my face just to make this a little bit easier. Now, of course, if you got questions, you can drop them in the comment section because I am happy to answer as many questions as I can. But again, I don't speak for ON1. These are just my observations based off of the article that I think everyone has access to, that if you're an ON1 user, you'll have access to this. So here's the deal. Key takeaways for photographers. And really it's for all users of ON1, but we know that the foundation of the customer that ON1 is targeting is 100% photographers. And so I have that in mind. All right. Photographers looking for the update. Now, as I mentioned before, this came out last week on Thursday, and Patrick Smith, Senior Vice President and General Manager is what I'm assuming the GM stands for ON1. He is writing this article to kind of explain where the future of ON1 is going. All right. So the first thing, there's a little bit of rebranding that's going to happen. This was actually towards the end of the article, but I think this is something we're going to see immediately, or at least sooner than we'll see some of the other things. But I wanted to bring this up front because one of the questions that I get asked a lot is the difference between the versions of ON1. So there's the standard version of ON1, and then there's ON1 Max, and then there's the subscription option. All right. And so what the team over at ON1 is doing is very simple. They're taking the subscription, the ON1 everything. So the version of the subscription that gives you lottie-dottie everything that ON1 offers, they're giving that to you in a new package, which is the ON1 Max Pro. All right. And I hate reading slides to people. I'd like to put this stuff up and then share, but the name change is intended for more clarity that reflects exactly what you're getting, which is you're getting everything that ON1 is offering. All right. Now, despite the name change, nothing is actually changing. And that's the reason why I wanted to start with this, because I know that as soon as I probably scheduled this live stream, for people who hadn't read this article would probably think like, oh man, ON1 is going to get rid of the standalone version or the one-off purchase. And the answer to that is no. At least nothing is identified in this article that that's happening. All they're doing is changing the name of their top tier subscription plan, and we're going to still be able to get the one-time payment of ON1 Photo RAW as that comes out every year. All right. So that's the first thing up front. Second thing here is more of the focus, right? Everything has to have a strategy. And we can't forget that ON1 is a company, they are a business, and they're providing a tool for us as photographers to use. And so I think their strategy, just as I'm understanding this article, the first one is they want to focus on the quality of the images that we are able to produce. All right. And so what we see here is, one, we're going to get better raw performance, which I think is a huge, huge benefit. And if you're not familiar, every photo editor that processes raw images, they have different algorithms or ways that software is going to interpret the raw file. And that's the reason why you can put an image into multiple editors out there and get different results initially. And then you have to work a little bit differently, sometimes harder, sometimes not as hard, to get the same look across other editors. All right. And so we're going to see better color and cleaner details, and then recovery. Now, what that means, I'm not sure. How we're going to gauge that, I'm not sure. All right. I imagine what you'll be able to do is you'll fill the software a little bit more responsive. And that's actually one of the things that Patrick was being clear in the article is ON1 is looking to make the software more of an extension of the user and less about technicalities and, all of those nuances and things of that sort. ON1 is really looking to help the photographer get back to just enhancing the photo. All right. You're still responsible for taking a great photo. You're still responsible for creating a great photo. ON1 is just trying to give you a tool that's going to allow you to enhance that photo. So that way you can get it out into the world and share with all of the people that you want to share it with. Now, moving to the center of the slide here, we have performance and reliability. I literally just spoke to someone about this today, about performance and reliability of ON1 Photo RAW. And, everyone has different, I guess, experiences when it comes to ON1 Photo RAW and the reliability that is here, all right, and the performance that you're getting out of it. I haven't seen as many of the issues as people have been claiming that they're having, and I'm not saying that they're not having those, right? But the goal over at the ON1 team, based off of this article, and time will tell, all right, time will tell if we're going to get this performance and reliability that they're telling us we're going to receive here in the near future whenever this gets released. But that's really good because collectively, when you're working with a software, and again, combining this with image quality improvements, this is going to make ON1 a really, really solid program. I think it's already a pretty, solid program. There are the challenges. I don't want to minimize that because I think many people, they'll tell you all of the good and never acknowledge the things that aren't working so well. And I think this is ON1's way of coming out and saying like, yeah, we heard you. We get it. We need to make the software more stable and make it perform a little bit better, or a lot better, whatever your take on that is. But the deal here is they are going to do that. And then the last portion of the strategy is the updates. They're going to make more steady updates. They're going to happen more frequently, and they're going to be thoughtful, focusing on the refinements. And we, as the users of ON1, will get an opportunity to provide feedback, insight to how we plan to use the software and what we need the software to be able to do, right? So this is a phenomenal opportunity. And so, one, I would say, as you are receiving those surveys, fill them out, which I think many people do. But if you ignore them thinking that ON1 isn't listening, I recommend that you fill them out and submit them. The worst thing that happens when you submit that survey is you invested 15, 20 minutes of your time, however long it took you to fill out that survey. But just think if that was the thing that ON1 needed to hear in order to make the software better for you. All right. So don't look or don't push over on those surveys if that's something that you think you want to see more improvements on the software. So AI is all over the place. ON1, in the article, it was very clear that, one, artificial intelligence is a enhancer for the photographer. All right. And so there's a lot of information about AI on the internet, and there's different versions of AI. So if you're not familiar of what's going on with AI, just know that there are a lot of different versions of AI. Now, am I the most intelligent person when it comes to artificial intelligence? Absolutely not. All right. However, the version that is inside of ON1 is not connected to the internet. It's ran local to your machine. So that means if you were to disconnect your computer from the internet and you wanted to use the Gen Expand or the generative erase tools, you don't have to have an internet connection. You could be in the mountains in the middle of nowhere and you could pull your laptop out as long as you have those components installed on your computer. So there is an initial installment that you have to make. Once you do that, you can disconnect your computer from the internet and then you're good to go. You can use it wherever you choose to use it, and it's going to run local to your machine. And so I think that's where a lot of people don't realize what that really means for their computing power. All right. Now, again, I'm not the most intelligent when it comes to AI, but I do know that AI takes up a lot of computing power. And so you need those more powerful computers in order to use those types of tools. Now, just moving into the middle, because I think this is where there's a lot of sensitivities in the community about AI inside of photo editing, and that's the privacy aspect of it. Are my photos being used to train a model? I know that Adobe, they had a conspiracy and they came out and said, no, we do not use your photos to train a model. However, there's a lot of people who, either believe that or don't believe that. But when it comes to ON1, just like I mentioned, all of the processing is happening local to your machine. So you could disconnect the computer. Your photos are never uploaded into their AI. Now, someone asked me, hey, Chris, well, what about the AI, the cloud storage, all right? Someone asked me about the cloud storage and, well, if that's ON1's cloud, can't they just use your images from there? And the answer is, sure, they exist there, but ON1 is not doing that. They've come out and said that they're not doing that, all right? Now, if you don't like that idea, well, you could literally not use their cloud service to store your image and continue using the AI tools local to your machine, and everything will work just as you would expect because ON1 isn't using your images to train their model. All right. Do I know what they're using to train their model? Absolutely not. Will they ever share that? I don't know. Maybe I'll have to ask them. But as of right now, they're not using our images to train the model, and I don't think they plan to. All right. Now let's jump back into the slides. Now, when it comes down to it, they want the human in the loop. All right. We're on the far right side of the slide here, and they want you to be the person making the decision of what's happening to your images, not those single click programs where you click a button once and your entire image is edited. And this is different than a preset, because even with a preset, you can go in and fine tune everything to your image's necessity. All right. But when it comes down to masking, noise reduction, cleanup, all of it, you have complete control over how the AI is modifying your image. And that's where the ON1 team is looking to make more trustworthy approaches of how they implement it. They're not just going to give us an AI tool that is a gimmick or something that is going to just, it's like the headline thing. All right. I think there was even a statement in the article that said they're not chasing the next headline. There's going to be more subtle changes and things on the back end of ON1 that's going to make ON1 a more stable, reliable, performance-driven program. And then when it comes to the AI, I imagine the exact same thing is going to happen here. All right. Now, when it comes down to the collaboration and transparency aspect of where we are with ON1, well, there's early access to the prototype, or if you're familiar with this, this is like beta testing. All right. Now, I want to be on camera when I say this. For everyone who signs up to be a beta tester, please, for every tester out there, and for the sake of just the integrity of the software, don't leak it. Like, the company is inviting us in to test the software, give them feedback so they can fix the things that maybe are not working so well, or so they can enhance the things that are working well with the feedback or whatever you are providing to them. So if you do sign up for the beta testing program, as one tester to another, please don't leak the information. Let ON1 work through the program and let them get the things that they want to get released out and into the hands of the people. All right. But be active in the program and voice your opinion in all of the appropriate channels in order to voice your opinion about how that program or that version of the software is working. All right. Now, outside of the beta testing aspect, there is the familiarity over novelty. And this goes to the sake of, we want, myself included, so I'm saying we want software that when you start working in it, that you don't have to relearn how the software actually works. All right. I personally have experienced this with ON1, and so I'm excited that they're going to make a dedication or some way forward of not making the software difficult to relearn or to learn as we're moving forward with it. So I'm excited for that. All right. And, one of the things that took me a long time to get used to is the new masking tools inside of ON1. Now, I'm extremely excited. In fact, we're going to edit a photo later tonight, and I'm going to walk you through some of the tools that I understand about working inside of ON1. Excuse me. However, when those tools were released, they were definitely, I had to take a second and really work with them to figure out how to get them to do the thing that I'm trying to accomplish. All right. Now, they are learnable, because if you take the time to learn it, you can do it. The challenge is if you are in the middle of a project, or if you are doing something where you want to get the thing done quickly and the tool limits you from doing it, well, then there's the frustration. And so I'm excited to hear that they're going to get a little bit more familiarity with the releases that are coming out. So we don't run into this issue anymore where our software becomes the stumbling block for us completing our vision, right? Now, those are all of the slides that I have. And now I kind of want to just go into a few thoughts that I have over the article as a whole, and then we'll get into an edit. So one, you have the article, the link to the article, I should say, down in the description box below. So if you want to go there, you absolutely can. And of course, if you got questions, you can drop them into the chat. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the computer here. And so one, we're getting a clear path, and, in fact, I'm not even going to go through the entire article because the slides actually did summarize pretty much what was in here. What I want to go to is at the very end of the article. All right. It's down here. Now, if you don't get to this point after reading through everything in the article, I want to just make it clear, or at least echo what Patrick is saying here, because I think that this summarizes where the future of ON1 is going. All right. If you want software that improves constantly, changing how you work, if you value control, consistency, and choice, if you want tools that feel familiar, reliable, and built for the long term, then this is the future we're building at ON1. Now, when I read this, I was like, okay, great, just information. But as I sat here preparing for this live stream, and I was just reflecting on that, these are questions that I have to ask myself about what do I want out of my photo editing software. And I don't want a program that constantly changes the way that I work. I do want it to improve. And in fact, on the channel, I had a post. And if you're not over on the YouTube, the Free Will Photos YouTube channel post, you should definitely get over there, because that's where I'm starting a lot of genuine conversations just about photography, photo editing in general. But one of the questions was stability and speed versus new features. And this is the very first thing that is mentioned here, right? So if you want something that's going to improve, but it's not going to change your workflow, then ON1 is for you. All right. And if you already got ON1, then, make a decision if you're going to stay or not, but definitely ON1 is for you. That's the direction that the company is moving. And then if you value control, consistency, and choice, then ON1 is for you. And when it comes down to control and consistency, we have a lot of control available to us inside of ON1. There are so many people that I have one-on-one training calls with who tell me they're not even using 20% of what ON1 is capable of doing. People aren't using the cataloging tools, which I'm not sure why that's not being used or why they're not being used. There's people who aren't using the features that are available for tagging. So I guess that still ties into the cataloging. But the layers inside of ON1, some people are saying that they're confusing. And I get that. Snapshots. People aren't using snapshots inside of ON1. And these are just tools that I'm thinking of that I use on a regular basis. And so every time when I speak with people about these particular tools and they tell me they're not using them, I'm like, okay, you're giving up all of the control. It's like you bought a Ferrari to go pick up a gallon of milk. And I do mean that analogy, right? There are so many other programs on the market that you could go with that don't have all of the features that ON1 has, and you would be perfectly fine. But you chose ON1. So my encouragement to you is to use the tools that are available to you. And if you have questions about, well, how can I use these tools? One, I have videos here on the channel. Two, I offer training calls. So when I say I will help you develop a workflow, I genuinely mean that. I want to help you use ON1 in your everyday workflow. All right. And it's not just ON1. I help people with all other programs as well, because I want you to develop your workflow. ON1 is definitely the first program that I offer, or at least that I pitch to people. But if you tell me, hey, I actually need to do X, Y, Z, then yeah, I'll help you find another program. All right. But the point here is, if you value control, consistency, and choice, ON1 is for you. If you want tools that feel familiar, reliable, and built for the long term. And this is the one statement that I think many people have been split or torn between, because with the release of 2026, from everyone that I've talked to, a lot of people have mentioned that they just didn't understand why the masking had to change, because they were already starting to get used to the masking in 2025 and 2024, and I think 23 when AI tools started getting implemented. And then 2026 came out, and it was like their world got flipped upside down. And if you hadn't been using Lightroom with their new masking tools, or the masking tools that are available there, then that would have been very off-putting. So I understand that. Now, with me being a Lightroom user, I use pretty much every photo editing program available. I understood what the tools were capable of doing. And then I just had to figure out how to get them to do the thing that they were capable of doing. And that's really what I want to encourage you to do, is figure out how to get the tools to do the thing that you want them to do. And if you got questions about, well, how do I get it to do that? Then you can definitely ask me. I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to answer all of the questions or even get you to the solution, because, ON1 does a lot. It doesn't do everything, and that's okay. All right. But I'll definitely do my best to help answer that. Now, the last two sentences here: we're moving forward with a clear focus, steady improvement, thoughtful innovation, and long-term investment in tools photographers can trust. Tools photographers can trust. And I think that that's important, because I don't know the full story, so I'm not going to say everything, but I know that there was a company during Imaging USA, which happened a few weeks ago or a week ago, that there was something published to a website, and it was AI driven, and that particular tool did not actually make the community happy, and it made people feel like that company was essentially betraying the people who used that tool. Now, again, I don't know all of the details. I only I listened to a portion in a podcast that talked about it, and so I won't claim to be the most intelligent on it. But when we see, phrases like tools photographers can trust, I think it goes in two ways. One, you can trust that it's going to work reliably. And then two, that the people behind building the tool, the company behind building the tool, is going to have the best interest for the user, you and me, and everyone else who's editing inside of ON1, going to have their best interest in mind, at least in the regards of not infringing upon their creativity and their rights of their usage rights of their images. All right. There are companies out there who do that. I'm not saying any company, because that's not the point of tonight's live stream. But I think that's one of the things that we can appreciate from ON1. And I do hope that ON1 comes out and really specifies like where they are in the AI space and that full transparency, because I think they want to be transparent. But I'm not sure where we're seeing that. And hopefully, we do get to see that. So those are the notes for tonight on ON1, no pun intended. And so, of course, if you got questions, you can leave them in the comment section in the future of ON1. Again, another reminder that there is a photography conference that's coming in February. And that, I'm doing a terrible job at selling this, by the way. But, here's the deal. There's a photography conference that's happening in February. If you want to save some money, then consider signing up for it before January 30th. So that way you can lock in the early bird pricing. All right. Now, something that I do actually know a decent bit about is photo editing. And so that's what we're going to jump into. We're going to jump into ON1 and take a look at photo editing. All right. Now, I did make a recent change to the channel that if you want to follow along and get the files, then you will need to become a channel member. All right. This is not some sort of a cash grab or anything of the sort, but it's more so I want to encourage people to understand the why behind the reason we're going to go grab a particular tool inside of ON1. So when you are sitting at your desk or at your computer with your images, you know why you're going to grab that tool. It's the whole idea of, if I teach you how to fish, you can eat forever. But if I give you a fish, then you're only going to eat until that fish is fed, or until you fed on that fish. I just completely butchered that too. But the point here is I really do want you to practice on your own images, because when things don't work the way that you would expect them to, you got to troubleshoot it. And when you troubleshoot, you get better at using the software. And that's the whole reason I started this YouTube channel, was to help people overcome photography software. All right. So if you value using the practice files, that's what we'll call them, then you'll definitely need to become a member. Now, it's not just practice files that you get as a member. You also receive the ON Photo file, which has all of the settings that I use on the image. And so if that's something you're interested in, then you'll be able to get that. Now, if you are a member, you got to go over to the posts and download them from there. Go over to the YouTube channel and click on posts. So that way you can see the members only posts where the links for all of these downloads are located. Now, all of that stuff out of the way, let me see. Do we have any comments coming up? No, we don't have any comments. Okay, outstanding. So we'll go ahead and just jump right into the actual photo editing aspect of tonight's live stream. So here's an image that I took when I went to the Build Expo, and I just want to really highlight the vessel, which is this structure right here. And originally when I took the photo, it looked really small in the frame. And so I wanted to cover up the edges of the frame. So that way, one, it directs your eye to the actual vessel. But two, it makes it look a little bit larger and more intentional. All right. So photo editing, it really does start in camera when you are capturing the photo. So what I want to do is just go ahead and smash the Brilliance AI button, and Brilliance AI is going to analyze the image, which I think it did already. So hold down the / key, and it did a very, very subtle job here. All right. And I like that. But I'm going to play around with this just a little bit, maybe around here. So before and after, you can see that underneath the little pathways here, it was just a little dark, and this just opened it up so that way we get more texture and detail out of the building. And so now I'll jump into tone and color and just take a look here at what Brilliance AI actually did, and I'm going to pull down on the saturation. And the reason I pull down on the saturation is because I want to see the contrast in the image. And the easiest way to see contrast in a photo is to pull down the saturation, and then you're just looking at the luminance values. And so as I start to pull these sliders, because I do want this to be a slightly more punchy image contrast wise. So as I start to pull these sliders, and I like to pull my shadows down. I know that a lot of people, they like to pull their shadows up, but what I like to do is pull my shadows down so that way I get that more defined, darker area in the image. And then I'll pull on my midtones, I'll pull those the opposite direction of my shadows. Now, because Brilliance AI already did a pretty decent job at getting the contrast pretty good here, all I'm going to do is balance this by pulling the actual contrast slider. And the reason the contrast slider is helpful in this situation is because my black and my white points have already kind of been set. I do have a little bit of wiggle room up here in the upper right, so I may even be able to just pull the whites over just a little bit more. Yeah, now we're starting to get that deep contrast that I like. Now I'm going to hold down the J key. I am losing a little bit of information here, but I'm actually okay with that. I'm also losing it in the sign. Let's see if I can recover that by pulling down on the highlights. And yeah, I pretty much got all of that out. So I think that I have a pretty good contrast overall in the image. And so let's go ahead and pull up on the saturation. And I'm not looking at the actual slider, I'm looking at the photo. And I think around here is about the amount of color that I want in the base or the canvas of the image. And so now let's play with the vibrance here a little bit. Maybe increase it. Yeah. And then that gives me a little bit more of that punchy color, right? And so before and after, it is like very, very minor, but I do like what I'm getting. All right. And because these are buildings, I'm just going to crank the structure a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's good. Make it a little bit more crispy. All right. Do I want to change the white balance? Let's see here. And by the way, I didn't script this out. This is literally just an image that I've been wanting to edit, and I just want to share that with you here on the stream, because this is kind of how I work. I open up an image and I test things out. And so I think cooling this image down actually helps with that copper color that's in the vessel. And so I actually like that. All right, so now it's time to go into the local adjustments and really start to enhance the light. And so what I'm seeing here is this strip of brightness right down the front side of the vessel. We already know that this is the subject. So how can I make the subject a little bit more interesting? Well, there's three ways. You can increase or decrease exposure, so that way you have contrast. That's the first way. The second way is saturation, so adding color or removing color. That's one way as well. And then the other way is texture. Things that have more texture tend to draw our eye to it more, and things that have less texture tend to take our eye away from it. So whenever you approach photo editing, and it doesn't matter what type of image you have, those three things are what's going to help with setting the foundation and the core of your editing overall. All right. And so what I'm going to do here is try and enhance this light as best as I can in some kind of way. So that means I have to use masking tools. Now, I think my first mask that I want to apply, I think I'm just going to make the entire image darker. And I'm going to use a gradient tool to do this. So just zoom out here for a second. And I am going to pull this all the way over the image. And you're probably wondering like, well, Chris, why did you do that? And I think I'm going to do it this way. Yeah. And let's press the letter O. Let's go like this. Yeah. And so you're probably wondering, like, well, Chris, why did you just do that? And the reason I did that, if you darken the entire image down and then bring the light back into the image, you have a whole lot more control over the creativity and whatever you want to do with that light. Like, you can literally shape the light however you want, because you're not adding new light. You're just exposing in the areas that you pulled the exposure down. You're re-exposing it. I'll show you what I mean. And so if I press the letter O, you can see that this particular darkening mask is coming in from the left side and moving its way up. And then it's covering up a little bit of this bright area. But look at what it's doing in this area right here of the vessel. So if I turn this off and then turn it back on, you see how I'm already like building some drama in the subject, and I've only applied one mask. All right. And so that's the reason why I want to do that. However, I don't want that much drama built up in this area of the photo. And so this is where you can start to shape the mask that you have with the new version of ON1 Photo RAW. So the 2026 version, we can come up here to our masking tools. Let me just go ahead and select this one more time. Okay. And then I'm going to hit the plus icon under mask layers, and I'm going to add in a brush, and I want to add to the mask, or I'm sorry, subtract from the mask. I don't want to add. I want to start to remove that negative exposure, so that way I get a little bit more dimension from this end of the vessel to the building that's over here. Again, I'm working with light first to start to separate this particular area. And so what I want to do is come up to the top of ON1 and click this little square icon. And this gives us our brush properties. And this is one of those areas when I talk to people and they tell me like, well, Chris, I don't even go to the brush properties. You're missing out on a lot of opportunity that's available to you inside of ON1 if you're not using the brush properties. And the reason, a lot of people, they have their flow set to 100%. And you'll notice that when I open this, my flow was actually set a lot lower. And so what I want to do is bring my flow down. And so you're probably wondering, well, Chris, what the heck is flow? Well, what flow does is as I paint, let me just press the letter O so we can see how this works. As I paint over this area, you can see I'm removing just a little bit at a time as I paint over that area. Now, what that does in retrospect, and I'm just going to go ahead and undo that real quick so we can watch it happen without the green overlay. You'll start to see the light come back into this area. And that is the beauty of working this way. All right. And you don't have to be precise because it's just a little bit that's coming back into the area. And you build these things up over time. So let's say I really want the light that was originally here on this little railway. I want that to shine through, but everything else can kind of be in the shadow. Now, I'm not going to do this for the entire photo, but I can literally just paint this all the way back in. And you can see how this is a little bit brighter than this one up here. But then I can just come up here and paint this one in, and I could do this over the entire image. And if I press the letter O, you can see that the mask is starting to let that original light come through, or the original image that was underneath here come through. And that's the beauty of working with the flow, is I could have different levels of that light coming through. So when we talked about control earlier, this is one of those things that, again, you buy the Ferrari, go race around the track a little bit. All right. I don't know why I keep going back to that terrible analogy of a Ferrari, but let me get a sip of coffee and we'll get right back into it. Okay, so now that we have that going, let's turn it off, turn it back on. You could see what it's doing to the image. And then of course, if I think that this is just like too much, I can always pull back on the opacity and then fade that in. And this is where you really do start to get that control that I was just talking about. Now, I need to do something on the right side of the vessel, but I'm not entirely sure I want to do anything to this area. All right. And so this is where that masking tool or masking tools inside of ON1 really do come in handy. And so what I'm going to do is hit the plus icon. I'm going to try, you know what? I'm going to see if ON1 identifies the subject. So I'm going to go ahead and click subject mask. And then once this loads, if it selects the vessel, then we're good. And if it doesn't, then we'll do something else. So let's press the letter O. Wow. Look at that. Again, I didn't plan this. I didn't practice this. I literally just opened up ON1 and this was the image that I've been wanting to edit. So I'm actually really happy with this particular selection. It did a really, really great job. It missed some things down here and on the left side, but I'm not worried about those because I'm about to subtract everything on this side of the mask anyway. So that way I can work with the shadows on this side, just like I was able to on this side over here. All right. So to do that, we'll come over to masking. We're going to hit the plus icon, and then I am going to come down here to gradient, and I want to subtract. So I'm going to click on subtract. Now, by default, it just places the linear gradient on the middle of the image. I'm going to rotate this around like so. I'm going to rotate it this way because I don't need this area to be impacted. I only want this side of the vessel. And then I'm going to fade this because this is light we're working with. And so it should be a gradual fade into that bright area that's coming right down the middle here. All right. So I'll press the letter O to turn that off. And now I'm just going to go ahead and pull down on the exposure. And already we're starting to get some dimension and separation of the vessel and really make it a little bit more interesting. All right. Now to set this off, we need to work with the middle portion of this structure. And so I'm going to do another subject mask. Hey, welcome and thank you for joining. Sorry, my screen just popped up. Welcome and thank you for joining. I appreciate that. But with that being said, we need to get this center portion here taken care of. All right. And so the subject mask has already been applied. One of my favorite ways of working with things that are symmetrical like this is using, we're going to come back up to masking. We're going to hit the plus icon and we're going to create a gradient and we're going to subtract it. But then what I'm going to do is come up here to the top and I'm going to select reflected gradient. All right. And we will come back over here and I think I'm going to have to invert this option. So let's see. And I guess I could have done this from the beginning. And you see, this is how I learned the software, guys. I can't make this stuff up. I'm literally just experimenting with this, and I wanted to select down the middle here. So I actually need the inverse of this. So what I'm going to do is come back to masking. And this is where I think a lot of people also get confused between target mask and mask layers. Is the target mask is going to require, or it's the composite of every mask layer that's down here. That's what's being added up here. And so what I need to do is invert the entire mask, the combination of these two together. And so I want to go to target mask, hit the 3-line menu, and then hit invert. And now I'm getting the area that I actually wanted to select inside of this building. And so we'll just filter that in. We'll tuck this in just a little bit more because I do want to focus really on this bright section here. So now I'll hit the letter O, and we're going to increase the exposure. And things that are brighter are typically a little bit easier to see, so we'll throw a little bit more structure into this area, and we may even come back and throw like dynamic contrast in here a little bit later. And so the more familiar you get with the tools, the easier it is. I see another comment here. Oh, hey, thanks for the super thanks, or the super sticker. The text on my second monitor is really small. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I will definitely keep up the good work here. Let me see here. My software does not want to cooperate with me tonight. My streaming software, I should say. So, but thank you. There we go. Just wanted to get that onto the broadcast here, just to share that with everyone. But, all right, we're going to jump right back into it. We are looking straight down the side here. Let's see. There we go. All right, so you can see it's a little bit brighter. It's getting a little bit better. We should probably contrast this. A general rule of thumb when it comes to exposure and contrast is if you increase the exposure, you should probably increase the contrast to keep things looking natural. If you decrease the exposure, you should probably pull down on your contrast to help keep things looking natural. So just keep that in mind as you work through your own images. Let me just go ahead and pull this down, and yeah, so turn it off, turn it back on. I like where we're going with this so far. All right. And so now I think it's time to start working with the rest of the image. All right. I see where the star is. And again, here's the before, and here's where we are so far. So we are starting to really build up these changes, and they're working out really well. But it's time to go a little bit further. We have some color down here that we could probably work with, but I really want to do something with this green and this bronze because those are the complementary colors. All right. Those are the complementary colors in this image, or at least the main colors in the image. And so that tells me I need to go grab a color enhancer, or at least a channel mixer, or a color mixer, I should say. So I'm not going to use a color mixer on this one, even though it's in my common tools, which, by the way, this is another new feature in the 2026 version of ON1. These are the effects presets, and I have essentially it's all of the presets that are available over here. You have access to inside of the section over here, and then ON1 has some preloaded options that you can use here. But where I find the most utility in this version of ON1 is creating my own and placing those here over, or creating my own and using those. So it was a lot to say to use that feature. All right. I do have a video about that on the channel. So if that's something you're interested in, you can definitely go check that out. But I'm going to go ahead and click on color enhancer because I want to start working with the color as I mentioned on the image here. All right. And so first things first, I'm going to click foliage because I think sometimes you could use a preset and it could really help out. Now, in this case, it made the greens look extremely radioactive. I'm not a fan of that, so I am not going to run with that one. All right. But sometimes you can use these presets, and I don't think I actually have a preset. That's an artistic look for fall colors, but I'm not a fan of that. Let's see if there's any other options in here. No, red enhancer doesn't look too bad, but it's also not doing what I needed to do. So we're going to create our own. And I think that that's the best way of doing this. All right. And so let's go ahead and minimize the color section, get some real estate down here. And we're going to start with our color in the actual vessel. All right. Now, what I want to do is click on the bottom here, this drop down, and select saturation. What that's going to allow me to do is take this color picker and then come over and click on the building. I'll click somewhere around here. And I was supposed to click and drag, sorry. I'm used to using the color editor, but with the color enhancer, you want to click and then you drag, and this allows you to work like directly on the image. Now, we're starting to venture into the realm of it not being realistic to what we actually see, all right, or what's actually there in New York. So if you were to go and look at the vessel, it's not going to be this vibrantly red or this saturated of a red. However, that's okay in some cases, all right? As long as you know that you're doing something like that, just make sure everyone else is aware that you're doing that. And I think it's fine, all right? And so for this photo, I think I'm actually going to make the reds a little bit more, we'll push them towards magenta, because I want the building to be less of that copper and more red. So I start to have this complementary play with the greens and the reds. So the red becomes like my pop of color. All right. And so that's kind of where I'm going with this. All right. And now I'm going to click on the magentas and I'm going to push those more towards the red, and let's saturate that. And then let's see if making them brighter, darker, nah, that doesn't really do anything. So let's go back to the reds, and we can make the reds a little bit brighter here. And then we'll move the oranges over to the reds. Yeah, there we go. Now we're starting to really get that color dimension, if you will. And this is kind of what I was thinking when I created the image. I was like, you know, the reds and the greens, I could do something with that in post-production. And so here we are. All right. Let's see here. Just playing around with these until I get the building. I'm not looking anywhere down here. I'm just looking at the building. And I think this is okay. All right. And so now I need to get this only in the building. And there's so many ways that, you know, you could think, well, just use a subject mask, because I don't want the reds down here getting impacted, because I want those reds to be kind of their own thing. Even though it is kind of cool to see this Hudson Yard sign down here, it does help with like just selling the story. I don't know. Maybe I'll come back to it, right? But let's go ahead and let's get rid of the color enhancer everywhere else except for on the building. So we'll click on the mask, come over here, and what tool? Let's try using the subject removal tool. So I'm going to click on background, and that's going to remove the color enhancer from everywhere except the subject. This is one of those areas of the Photo RAW 2026 that is a little confusing, but it is learnable. And so essentially what I did is I knew that the subject selection tool was going to select the building, which it actually did a really good job. So I may not even need to do what I was going to do next. But instead of the color enhancer going over the entire image, I said, I don't want you to impact my background. And so by default, when you subtract from the rest of the image, it's going to select the subject. And so that's how I got this selection. It's not the most intuitive, and I completely admit that. And, you know, I do hope that we see the subject selection tools work the same way as they do in local in a near release. But for right now, this is how we have to do it. All right. And that actually did a pretty good job at making the selection. So I'm just going to leave that as is. And now I'm going to add in another color enhancer. All right. And this one is going to be the color enhancer for my foliage, and then maybe even for the sign, but I'm really only focusing, oh, excuse me. Sorry. I'm really only focusing on the sign here. All right. And so the foliage. So let's go yellow, and I want to probably desaturate it a little bit and then darken it down, because I don't need any attention on this foliage. Like, you get it. You know that we're kind of looking through some leaves. And so I think that that's going to be just fine. But maybe I can make it a little bit more green if I wanted to really stress that red-green color palette, which I'm not sure that I do. And I could probably even, yeah, I think I'll just leave the yellows right in the middle here. I'm not going to change anything there, but I may push the greens more towards a yellow. Yeah. And then let's play around with darkening. Darkening and brightening. I think that works out just fine. Okay. I think I could work with this. I like how that's coming out. And so now let's see if we can use the same color enhancer to deal with the buildings, because there isn't anything in the vessel that should be this blue color. And so if I go aqua, like I guess there's this blue that's going through here, and we may need to do something to protect that from the vessel, but we'll find out here in a second. Let's just go ahead and go crazy with the brightness in the aquas. Yeah, that's just barely impacting the image overall. So let's go to the blues. All right, so the blues are impacting the vessel. And actually, I don't mind them getting a little bit brighter. But I'm actually going to make it a little bit darker. And let's desaturate those blues. I'm just experimenting here, everyone, so bear with me as I figure out the color palette that I want to work with. Okay. I kind of like what we got going on with this, but I don't necessarily want that in the vessel. I want the vessel to sit in its own color space. And so what I'm going to do this time is select the subject, or erase it from the subject. All right. So I'm going to come up to masking. And then when I click subject, by default, whenever you are working in the effects module, it's going to erase from that area. All right. So I'm going to click subject, and it's going to erase it from the vessel. So now if I press the letter O, you can see it's just going in between everywhere on the vessel, but I'm not sure if it is protecting the areas that I want it to protect. And so let's go ahead and let's turn it off and then turn it back on. Okay. I don't know. Is it doing it? And just make it a little bit darker. See. Yeah, okay. I could live with it. I could definitely do better at making the selection, because it is missing some of those areas, but it's still selecting the blues. But I'm actually okay with removing some of the blues out of the vessel now that I'm looking at it. I initially thought I wouldn't want to do that, but I actually like where it's going. All right, so we'll leave that as is. Now, what do I want to do next with this image? I feel like we need to figure out how to make this light look like it's supposed to be there, right? Like, we know it's supposed to be there because it's there. I didn't do this myself, but context in the image, we don't really see that, because this would literally be coming from behind me, And so the only way that I can really tell the story that the light is coming from the front is if I make a little bit of a light pattern in here. So let's go to local adjustments, and I'm going to use another gradient mask, and we're going to hit add. We'll increase the light, and then I'm going to come up here and go to center, and we are going to try and make something. So it's not going to stay this bright. I'm just doing this so I can see how I'm shaping this, and then I'll know where everything is supposed to be, because this should actually be more of a harsh light if we're going to go, you know, like this kind of just falls off almost immediately. And so we'll probably do something that is more like maybe larger. Nah, we'll go smaller. And then we'll just feather that. And remember, if you move the exposure slider to the right, you should move your contrast slider in the same direction as you move your exposure slider. So if I'm going to increase the exposure, I probably also need to increase the contrast just to keep things looking pretty decent down there. And then I'll increase the structure in this area. And let's just turn it off and turn it on. Maybe fade this in just a little bit better. Yeah, and then I'll even throw some saturation down here because I like the colors. Like whoever painted this mural down here, they did a really good job with the color palette. And so I don't want to mess that up. And we'll even throw some vibrance in there. So let's take a look at this off and on, off and on. Yeah, I think I can work with that. We'll even pull this up. So, okay. This is one of those places where it's a good idea to take a look at the before and the after, because sometimes you can get in the heat of editing and you don't realize how much you've actually transformed the image because it looked the same 2 seconds ago as I was working on it. But how did it look 10 minutes ago when I started to edit? So again, here's the before and here is the after. And I really like what we're getting here. Now, I should probably do some like dappled areas of light as well. And so I'm going to add in, I think I'll do this with, should I do it with a brush? No, I'm not going to do it with a brush. I'll do it with another gradient. So we'll go gradient. This is my favorite tool, by the way. The gradient tool is my favorite masking tool. It has been, even when I was editing in Lightroom, I have been using gradient tools since I learned photo editing. So it's just a tool that I gravitate towards and I love them, right? So if you're like, Chris, aren't there other masking tools that you could use? The answer is yes, there are, but the gradient tool is my favorite. All right, so let's go ahead and just make that a little bit smaller. We'll fade it out here and extend that. And let's contrast this area as well. Throw in a little bit of structure, but not too much because there's nothing really important there. It was just a bright area, and I think throwing in a little bit of dappled light is helpful. But I'm even going to cool this area down because I don't think that it needs to be warm. I don't know, maybe I won't do anything. We'll just leave it alone. Maybe desaturate it. Yeah, like I don't need any real attention going to that area. I just want to make the image look balanced. And so that's why I'm adding in this dappled light that is in this area. All right. And I'll probably even pull down on the opacity and then just pull it up ever so slightly, blend it in. Yeah. And then let's turn that off, turn it on. It's a subtle adjustment, but it's making a difference. All right. So the next question that I need to answer for myself is, what the heck do I want to do with this area up here? And I'm actually noticing something with the greens here. And so I want to go back to effects, and I think it was this color enhancer. Let me turn that off real quick. Yeah. Okay. So I realized that the blues and the greens, like when I was working with the blues and the greens, you can see there's like this weird green halo that's going around the greens here. Now, the way to fix that is to separate this mask and make a mask that's just dealing with the foliage, and then make a mask that's just dealing with the blues in the buildings. But yeah, I guess that could be done relatively quick. So if I go right click here, copy, let's go add filter. We'll add in another color enhancer, and then we're just going to paste the mask in there, because, and it didn't copy the mask. Copy the right mask. Give me this one, and then come back over here and paste. There we go. All right. And then what we'll do is I will come back to this color enhancer, and I will change the blues, just reset them by double clicking on the text for each of these headers. And then also come into the aquas and reset that as well. And then I'll leave the greens alone. And then I'm going to come to this color enhancer. And since it's the exact same mask, what I can do now that I'm separating those colors is I could go ahead and apply those exact same settings. So I think we were desaturating, making it darker. And then in the aquas, I was making those darker as well. And then what I need to do is press the letter O to get a look at the mask, and I need to remove it from the foliage here. All right. And so what I'm going to use to do that, we're going to come up here to masking plus, and then let's see, we'll use the quick mask AI, and let's go with, we want to add to the mask. And so let's let that analyze, and then we'll see if we can select this area right here. Just the foliage. Looks like it's doing some of that selection. It's also selecting in this area. Yeah. So for the sake of the stream, and like, this is what I do on a regular basis when I'm editing. I really do spend the time trying to come in here and modify all of these masks as much as I can. But just like I'm showing you how I'm working with this mask right now, this is essentially what I would have to do, or what I do, I should say, not what I would have to do, what I do when I come working inside of ON1. And so I actually probably need to invert. So I completely did that wrong. We're going to go plus, and then we're going to go quick mask and subtract. And then I'm just going to see if I can select it in large batches. And if I can't, then I'm not going to spend too much time, because this isn't interesting to watch. I mean, unless you just enjoy watching me struggle, which is fine. I would enjoy watching me struggle too. But there we go. So I did successfully subtract it. So now the blues are only coming out of those other areas. And you can see it starts to clean up this area just a little bit. Not entirely And so I would have to still probably go in here with a brush or something. And so that would look something like, let's go with this and grab a brush, and we probably want to add. And remember, I still have that low flow on the brush. And so I would just paint right along the edges here to add in this correction. And then that stuff will start to go away eventually as I paint that in. But again, I'm not going to worry about it. We're just going to call it good. I'm going to come back over to this, the original that we created, because I am getting off track. But this is just how it is when you start working with your files. All right. Yeah, I think this will get me where I need to be. All right. So again, before and where we are so far. And so now I think it's time to go into that stylistic thing and texture. And dynamic contrast is the way that many people will probably add texture into their images. And I'm going to show you kind of a technique that I use from time to time. I don't use it all the time, but I do use it from time to time. And get a sip of my coffee. But I use it from time to time in order to just create some dimension in the file. All right. And so I'm going to click on Surreal, and it looks like it is over processed, like someone just cranked up on the contrast in the image, and that's fair. All right. So now what I'm going to do is use a brush to actually paint this into the areas that I want to paint it into. All right. So first, what we need to do is grab our brush, and then we'll hit subtract as a default. And then I'm just going to subtract it from all of the places where I know for a fact I don't need it or want it. Now remember, my brush is on a low flow, and so I can just like wildly paint all over the image. All right. If I press the letter O, just so I can see my overlay and all the areas that I may have missed. And I'm not going to make this perfect on the stream, but this is a technique. Again, I use it from time to time, and essentially what I like to do, you could probably use a gradient for this, but you just don't have as much control or fidelity, is I just start moving towards the center of the image, and I reduce my brush size as I remove, getting closer to the center of the image. And what that does is it starts to like focus in on the main subject here. So if I hit the letter O and I press to turn this off and on, it's still way too much. So again, you don't want to always leave that overlay on. And yeah, I think that's looking a little bit better. I may even have to blend this with the opacity, because Surreal is a very strong look to begin with. And so what I want to do is just pull that up ever so slightly, maybe right around here. And then if I turn it off and turn it back on, you can see it just starts to make the image pop just a little bit more. But I can tell that this building was getting some of that treatment. And I don't care about this building back here. I don't even know what that building is. Somebody from New York is probably like cringing right now, like, Chris, what do you mean? I'm not from New York, by the way. I'm originally from California. So I just go and visit New York frequently. So I know where this building is. I just don't know what this building in the back is. So, but with that being said, let's go ahead and turn this off and then turn it back on. And you can see how that's just bringing a little bit of attention right into the middle of the frame. And, you know, some people use vignettes. You could, and I will throw a vignette on here, I'm sure, at some point, but I didn't want to do that. So I addressed light, I addressed color, and I addressed texture. And my dog is addressing our carpet right now. He's scratching it for some reason. But aside from that, it's now time to like style the image, right? And you know, there's a ton of effects that you could use inside of ON1. Here is, you know, the long list of effects that are available. But I just put in a lot of effort to really shape the foundation of this image. And so I think the only thing I really need to apply is probably a color grade. And that's really just to help with the enhancing of the blues and the reds. And so what I'm going to do is in the shadows, I'm going to pull those down to blue, but not heavily, just a little bit. And then in the midtones, and I'll probably, and I'm only going to work on the vessel first. So, because I'm going to mask this in. And so then the midtones, I'll just push those over to the red and maybe even darken those just a little bit. And then we'll pull some more over here to the red. Let's darken that down. Maybe brighten it. I don't know. Let's see. Okay. And so now we'll just go ahead and try masking this in. So I'm just going to hit that background button. It's going to throw it on just the vessel. And so if I turn this off and turn it on, you can see it's a color grade. It's not actually working, so I don't think I'm going to use it. We're just going to get rid of that. You know, you experiment. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, just throw it out. That's how I edit, all right? You guys are literally just watching me do what I would normally do. And so now, let's see if a glow will do anything for this image. I like to throw a glow on my photos at the end. Yeah, look at that. To me, that just looks beautiful. I don't know why I like this look, but to me, it brings like a simple elegance to the image. And that's probably not even the right way of saying it. But I just enjoy it. And then I'll probably finish this off, like I said earlier, with a big softy vignette. And I will lower the opacity and maybe even increase the size so that way it's not. Let's just get rid of the feather real quick, see where this thing is. Yeah. And maybe make it a little bit more round. And now we'll decrease that feather, increase the overall, and I think this is where we will end with it for the evening. So here's the before, literally straight out of camera, and as I turned it back on, it gets brighter. And as many of you know, I enjoy darker images, so that's just the way that I edit. And I've made this image a little bit darker. Part of me is wondering if I should work on shadows and highlights a little bit more, but I don't think I will. I think I'm just going to leave this as is and go from there. So you let me know what your thoughts are on the editing that we did here tonight. If you found it valuable, then please go ahead and smash that like button and consider subscribing. Again, the future of ON1 Photo RAW, I think it is going to start to move in a direction that is beneficial for everyone who uses the software. And so I'm actually really, really excited for that, to see where this is going to go. If you got questions about ON1 Photo RAW, leave them in the comment section below. If you want to learn how to use the software and get a workflow that is really going to help you become better and a little bit more agile in the system or in the software, consider signing up for a training call with me. The link for that is also in the description box. And then last but not least, don't forget there is the early bird special for the outdoor photography conference. I will be instructing at this conference on February 23rd through the 25th. A link for that to sign up is in the description box below. And I'd be excited to hear once you sign up, just comment, I've signed up. All right. So until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.